Okay, so how do you run a user interview? I'm Ash, I work as a UX researcher, and I'm excited to talk about this. If you're a designer, product manager, or UX researcher just starting out, let's go over some of the best practices to get the most out of user interviews. Good user interviews start with human connection. Simple. But I don't know if you know this, since most user interviews offer an incentive to participants, there's a risk that the interviewer will join the session with the mindset of trying to squeeze the orange to get all the good juice out of the participant. And on the other side, the participant will try to please or do what they think the interviewer expects them to do. In other words, there's no trust developing between the two people. So my first point is, do not think of user interview as a transactional activity. If that's the impression you're giving the participant you're interviewing is probably not going to be honest with you. They'll try to come up with interesting thoughts or compliments or whatever they suspect you want to hear. How do you get to those valuable insights then? By focusing on a genuine connection with the participant, treating the person as an individual rather than a subject. This is really what makes or breaks the interview. If you establish rapport, there's enough trust to get to the important stuff. That's why we start by asking questions about the person or any topic that we sense would make the participant feel at ease. We try the forward way. You can ask a question or two related to one of these topics. Obviously, the challenge is that the clock is ticking. That's one of the differences between user interview and a simple chat. With a casual conversation, there may not be objectives, no time restrictions, while a user interview requires you to listen more than you speak and be hyper aware of the time things are taking and the pace of the conversation. Since we spoke of objectives and pacing, I think this is a good time to speak about the preparation for the user interview. In summary, you start with objectives. What are the key questions you need answers to, or the themes that you'd like to explore? And from there, it's time to write a script or a guide. This is a list of questions you like to ask. There's different types of questions asked during an interview, and I plan on making a whole video on those questions. But for now, imagine you have this list done. Will you be running this list of questions one after the other, regardless of the answer you get? This is what people call a structured interview, but this is not what we do in user interviews because we want to encourage a more natural, engaging conversation. With user interviews, we tend to go with a semi-structured format. So we have an outline of topics to be covered for the discussion, but the specific questions and their order can be adapted during the interview. Now let's consider this. How many questions should you ask? In a typical 1-hour interview, if you try around 30 questions, it means 2 minutes per question. Once you get going with participants, you notice some people can easily take 4 or 5 minutes to elaborate on a question. So when crafting your guide, keep this in mind to ensure the interview experience is not rushed or rapid fire. Oh, I have lots of questions to ask. Can I make it 1 hour and a half, 2 hours? So my experience is that 1 hour, a bit more than an hour, is what people can take. Going past that lead to fatigue and losing focus, and the quality of the answers drops as well. Then how do you ensure the timing will work before actually interviewing someone? So here's an idea. What about a rehearsal session with your team? This not only helps fine-tune your questions, but also creates an opportunity for feedback. Get your stakeholders to have a say. You could think, oh, I've shared the guide with the stakeholders already. But it's not the same as having them observe you asking questions. Watching it happen will actually give them a much better sense of how this session will play out. What I usually do is I invite someone from the team to role play as the user for this rehearsal. I know your mileage may vary. In my case, having someone role play as customer has always led to a productive experience, and the person role playing becomes even more aware of a bunch of things about the interview, increasing their empathy for the participant and what they're going through. What about the structure of the interview? Is there a structure to follow? Usually you begin slow, a couple of easy questions, because at this point it's about building rapport. We're going broad. And we may stick to concrete questions at first. Concrete questions are less intimidating because it's about specific things or facts that the person knows. and the answers are more straightforward, while the interviewer can use these answers to guide the rest of the interview. Then we start to get more specific and focused. This is the meaty stuff, where you'll spend most of the time and where you get to capture more of the participants' thinking. As the interview winds down, you broaden up again. I've heard the description of an hourglass. You start broad with open-ended questions, go for details, more follow-up questions, and broaden up at the end, almost as a recap. And right at the end, you can ask participants if there's anything that was missed or they would like to mention. This is known as the doorknob effect, typical of doctor's appointment. You're about to leave, and when you get to the door, you remember this pain in the back, and you have to check with the doctor, and it can lead to unexpected insights. Since we're speaking of interview, a part that can be overlooked is tone. To one side, you don't want to sound too casual or friendly, otherwise it's easy to lose focus and have the interview derailed. On the other hand, the effort to make it professional and neutral can backfire. In some cases, I know you're interviewing in front of your peers, you want to come across as professional, but authenticity matters, and excessive professionalism can go in the opposite direction of what you're trying to achieve.
Could you please describe any difficulties you've encountered?
Well, sometimes it's hard to find the specific items I want.
And have you considered a different approach?
What do you mean? This isn't about me not knowing how to shop. It's about the store's organization.
What you see here is a reenactment of a researcher who is not asking anything inappropriate, but this professional tone can be misunderstood. So stay human, stay humble, no airs of being an expert or specialist during the interview. In fact, you can even say, I'm here to learn from you. Do you have to multitask during the interview? Well, if you're starting out, you can lean on others to help, but as you gain more experience, you are expected to manage most things yourself. What does this mean? In the most basic level, you're paying attention to what the person is saying and what is relevant. In the next level, you're also capturing what is not relevant right now, but may lead to something important later. So you're making a note of that. And you're also noticing what hasn't been covered yet and needs further prodding. And in the next level, the expert level, you're doing all those things and paying attention to time management, prioritizing what is most relevant path to take under the circumstances. If you're running a session via video call, I suggest you take notes throughout the conversation, but not the proper note-taking that most people talk about. I do those notes for my own personal reference, just to keep track of any info that may be used as a thread that leads to a different branch in the conversation. Something that I would say like, oh, can I take you back to that something you said earlier? As an example, I was conducting an interview with a participant about a meal planning app. I asked him about the challenges of dietary restrictions. Not an issue, he said. But because he had mentioned his family at the beginning, I asked him about his partner, about his children, and he's like, well, my daughter went through a vegan phase, and this led us to discuss the difficulties of finding suitable recipes for his daughter. Taking notes also gives me room to think, and it's almost like a justification for some silence between the two of us, so the participant is encouraged to keep talking. Are there any downsides to running user interviews? With stakeholders, I hear some raise concerns about user interviews being too subjective. This is changing nowadays, but it's a common misconception we often need to address. Another challenge comes from the excessive focus on words. This is something we have to explain to the rest of the team. Remember, it's not just about what people say, it's also nonverbal cues, silence, body language, facial expressions. All these things are important and easy to overlook. If you're a researcher, this is where your expertise comes in. You might have noticed I haven't covered how to get started with a research study. If you need to go more in depth on setting your research, consider, and I'll look into producing another video all on questions to ask during the user interview. I want to have more examples there. There's more resources you can check down below. I will mention Steve Portigal's book, Interviewing Users, published in 2013, but it holds very well. Link to it in the description below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you around.